Alright everybody, how are you doing today? Most of the news I'll be covering today is more domestic, but, within the United States concerning. But this is one I'm going to touch up on. So from Reuters, effort in U.S. Congress to rein in China on Hong Kong protests faces obstacles. A push in the U.S. Congress for legislation to support pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong and pressure China to refrain from a violent crackdown faces an array of obstacles, raising questions about the prospect it will ever become law. The face of the legislation could depend in part on whether lawmakers who represent states with companies heavily invested in the Chinese market can overcome concerns about Beijing's retaliation against U.S. businesses. The outlook is further clouded by a cautious response on Hong Kong by the Trump administration at a crucial juncture for U.S.-China trade talks and uncertainty over whether congressional leaders will make the issue a priority on a crowded end-of-year agenda. The House of Representatives unanimously passed Hong Kong human rights legislation in mid-October, including a bill that would place Hong Kong's special treatment by the United States under tighter scrutiny, drawing accusations from Beijing that the lawmakers had sinister intentions. A Senate committee approved a similar measure in September, but it has not been scheduled for a vote by the full body, which is required before legislation can be sent to President Donald Trump. The White House has yet to say whether he would sign or veto it. Even as Hong Kong activists have set their hearts on stronger U.S. action, which they see as vital to a movement that has drawn millions to the streets, the issue remains largely up in the air in Washington. The bill's delay, against a backdrop of increasingly dangerous clashes between protesters and police, has been a source of frustration for lawmakers whose overwhelming support for the legislation cuts across party lines. Yeah, they're actually too busy with this whole take-down Trump nonsense to even worry about Hong Kong. Go figure. And I'm all for non-interventionism, but when someone actually wants your help and has asked for it, I think you should consider giving it. And in this instance, I think you should. You should just support, as an American, you should support any rebellious movement against a foreign power, so long as their grievance with that foreign power is legitimate. Otherwise, we'd be invalidating our own nation, because that's how we were formed. So we should support Hong Kong. I mean, go figure, when you look at all the nasty shit the Chinese government's up to and the sheer lack of democracy, which is their main concern, then Hong Kong should be fully supported by the United States. But we can't support Hong Kong so long as the Senate and the House of Representatives are, at each other's throats because the House of Reps is trying to screw Donald Trump at any and all juncture that they see. How are we going to help anyone so long as this partisan nonsense keeps going on? Ugh. But they keep going on. They go on to say, your guess is as good as mine as to why something that enjoys that broad bipartisan support, and on an issue that's acute and happening now, has not reached the floor of the U.S. Senate. Republican Senator Marco Rubio, a leading China hawk and the bill's chief co-sponsor, told Reuters. Oh, you know why it's not getting there. It's because they're too busy trying to impeach Trump or being at each other's throats. They're acting like a bunch of fucking children. Looming over the Hong Kong crisis is the bitter trade war between the world's two biggest economies. Trump has said he and Chinese President Xi Jinping will soon sign a Phase 1 trade deal, his administration's top priority with Beijing. At an October 11 meeting in the Oval Office, Trump told Chinese Vice Premier Liu He would keep quiet on Hong Kong protests as long as progress is made on trade, according to two people briefed on the discussions. The White House did not respond to a question on whether Trump made such a promise or if the administration was concerned the Hong Kong situation could complicate trade talks. While Trump has since avoided publicly criticizing China over Hong Kong, Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have spoken out against Beijing's human rights record in Hong Kong and elsewhere, including its treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. The legislation reflects an increasingly hardline sentiment among some of Trump's fellow Republicans and many Democrats over what they see as Beijing's tightening grip on Hong Kong. Protesters are campaigning against what they see as Chinese meddling with the freedoms promised under the one country, two systems formula. when Britain returned Hong Kong to Chinese rule in 1997. China denies doing so and has blamed Western countries for stirring up trouble. The U.S. bills would amend existing law to require annual certification from the State Department that Hong Kong remains sufficiently autonomous from Beijing to justify the unique treatment by Washington that has helped it develop into a major financial center. China has threatened unspecified countermeasures, prompting the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong to warn of counterproductive consequences of the legislation that could hurt U.S. businesses. That has given rise to speculation that some senators, especially those in agricultural states or with major China-dependent businesses, would prefer a go-slow approach and might even work behind the scenes to block the legislation. Mark Simon, a Hong Kong-based executive for Next Media, a media group funded by pro-democracy businessman Jimmy Lai, is pessimistic about the Senate bill's near-term prospects after a recent round of meetings with members of Congress in Washington. Simon expressed concern that as many as 9 senators might have objections to the bill, though none has said so publicly. The U.S. Senate, by refusing to stand up for Hong Kong, is editing our political process in order to sell some grain, pork, and planes, he told Reuters. Rubio said he had not heard objections from fellow senators, but noted it could be somehow wrapped up in the border trade issues and fear that it could unravel that. So, to finish this one off, despite activists clamoring for U.S. action, some experts say it could be counterproductive. Steve Sang, director of the China Institute at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies, said the legislation would play into Beijing's hands by claiming it as evidence of existence of a foreign black hand behind the protests in Hong Kong. Count on them saying it's Russia. Count on it. That's what every other country in the world these days does. Have a problem? Blame it on Russia. Everyone's boogeyman. Bills similar to the current legislation have been introduced and gone nowhere in the past 3 Congresses. But the protracted crisis in Hong Kong has helped the measures advance further than previously. The White House did not respond to requests for comment, but a U.S. official speaking on condition of anonymity said the administration was prepared to let the congressional process run its course. It is unclear whether Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will set a vote on a bill during an already jammed schedule in the final weeks of the 2019 session, including the threat of a federal government shutdown and looming impeachment proceedings against Trump. One way to get around these obstacles, congressional aides say, would be to attach the Hong Kong legislation to a broader Senate bill on defense or the budget. If things get bad enough, the shit'll get passed and we'll be helping out Hong Kong. But it's going to take a lot of strife and a lot of pain before we get there. Let's face it, when helping out people who actually need our help, the United States is incredibly useless. In that way, we're like the EU. It's going to take us forever because we're too busy bickering with each other in our politics, with the Democrats constantly trying to do this or that to get Trump impeached or otherwise removed from office. Because they're butthurt over losing the election. Plain and simple. And they can't grow up and realize that there's bigger issues, such as this Hong Kong situation. They're children. You know what, Hong Kong? Just go ahead and proceed without us. We are going to be of no help to you at all. At this point, we are going to be no help. Go on without us. Get your independence from China. If necessary, do what we did. 1776. But otherwise, yeah, just go on without us, Hong Kong. Our government's too useless right now to help you with anything. That's all. Peace.